everyone. Welcome back to the Good Doctor's coverage of Hulu's Mrs. America. I'm Dr. Kristen.
I'm Dr. Erin.
And we are here today talking about episode 8, entitled Bella. 7?
I know.
Lobby.
It's okay.
COVID brain.
But it's still about Bella.
It's still about Bella. See, I did watch the episode, guys. I just don't like numbers. So it takes place in April 1977 and focuses a lot on Bella Abzug and the formation of the, spoiler alert, didn't last very long, National Women's Convention.
I know. It's such a wonderful idea.
It is a rich episode on a lot of fronts, from both the pro and anti or pro-family versus whatever, language is a thing in this movement from the beginning, and we see that a lot here now.
Yeah.
But so we'll talk about like the Phyllis camp and the Bella camp and those kind of competing ideas. Summary-wise, it really is about that. It's about Bella working with Gloria and Betty and a lot of other people to get this convention off the ground after she loses her Senate race. And then the movement of the Stop ERA machinations to essentially hijack that movement, the convention. And I use hijack very, very intentionally because while I do believe that all movements, if your feminism isn't intersectional, it's bullshit. So you need as many perspectives as you can get. But if you are going in with the intent to not participate but to destroy, that's what I'm going to call hijacking. Yeah. Conservative women had every right to be at that, and they should have been.
And their voices, but the problem is that they're not there to contribute to the movement. They're there to stop it.
And very deviously, and in ways that essentially felt like I was reading Dick Cheney's playbook. So I think he must have, either they have the same brain or man, their machinations are very, very similar.
It was super Watergate, man.
Yeah.
Okay, we're breaking into offices and stealing playbooks.
Literally.
This is the moral authority that God has given you? Cool.
And then there's a lot of dancing around how we denounce the Klan versus actually denouncing the Klan, which is brought me a lot of thoughts right now on how David Duke has endorsed the president, and the president has not explicitly said he does not support the Klan, and kind of that dancing around that some conservative party members have been doing since the Klan started, to be quite frank. So nobody wants to be associated with the Klan, but there's a lot of people that don't seem to have a problem with essentially they'd be part of the Klan. You get the impression that they are emotionally part of the Klan. They just don't like the Klan's PR.
Yeah, or they want the voters. They want so much of this is, the perceived strength of white supremacy, and in some ways the actual strength of white supremacy.
Yeah, it's true.
And trying to keep that on side. And that certainly is what Phyllis is doing in a very calculated way, and Lottie Beth is doing in a very calculated way that, we've seen time and time again, including right now.
And the other interesting thing, in terms of kind of a now parallel, is that Betty makes the excellent point that the feminist movement concentrates on too much, and that they do too many things, and that they should just be focusing on this one thing. This is the exact same complaint that a lot of Democratic strategists have about the Democratic Party versus the GOP. If you listen to Pod Save America guys who are Democrats, they bleed blue emotionally. Their big problem is that the Democrats never have a message for anything.
Right.
That is cohesive and something that people can understand. And so in a way I was like, oh, we've had that problem forever. Good.
Yeah, this show is constantly one of those balancing acts, right? Where it's like, oh, we've been here before. I find that both equally comforting and disturbing.
So, the idea of a single focus versus a scattershot approach is fundamentally one of the things we talk about in business all the time. Yeah. If you don't know your audience and your market, and you don't have a narrow laser focus on what they are and what you can offer them, you're not going to be successful. And look, where is the National Women's Convention now? Where, you know, it's hard when you look at the history of oppressed people, and the history of revolutions that oppressed people have wrought. It is often about everything for them because every element of their life was oppressed. And so past, we just want to be free. They want to focus on everything because everything's a problem. Yeah. But the most long-lasting ones, like I think about the movement for housing rights in Northern Ireland as a civil rights movement, like John Hume focused so laserly on housing rights.
Yeah.
Like, oh yeah, we have problems with everything. We got problems with police, we got problems with jobs, let's focus on housing. Mm-hmm. Let's just make it sure the housing can work. It's one of the reasons that progress was made in the direction and the speed at which it was made. So that from a Abbey Research business perspective, I think that's also a really good lesson we can take from this. Phyllis was successful because she was a fearmonger. Fear motivates.
Yep.
And because she was single-minded in her focus.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. And it's one of the more interesting conversations to ever happen in this show, full stop, and in this episode certainly, was when we get to the part where Phyllis was supposed to show up at a meeting that Bella was going to be at in Normal, Illinois, and debate each other again. And everyone was a little bit worried that we'd have a repeat of the Betty Friedan debate. But Phyllis is on the struggle bus right now, being sidelined by not wanting to be the, front of this infiltration job of the National Women's Convention.
But also really interestingly, like, brought low by her kids.
Yeah. Phyllis Jr. changing her name to Liza was a big blow. Nobody wants to be Phyllis Schlafly Jr. Which, oh God, could you imagine? But we get a confrontation between Bella and Rosemary and Alice, and that other woman's name I can't remember, who's has a horrible husband. Pamela. I knew I read it.
Oh yeah, and that one meeting where they were talking about women, husbands being allowed to beat their wives or whatever, and I could have strangled Phyllis for anyway. So,
yeah. Pamela's got some stuff going on. So the three of them go to the meeting to confront Bella, and Bella ends up turning them completely on their heads. And it's the thing we've been saying this whole time, right? Like, Phyllis Schlafly is one of the most liberated women in America. She is a feminist because she believes in all of these things. She just believes in controlling it in a way and saying who gets to be who gets to have this right to work and leave the house and all of this kind of stuff. But that when she says to her, worst of all, she's a goddamn feminist, she might be the most liberated woman in America, I was like, yes. But it's so interesting to show the complexity of these women as well, right? Which is what that scene did so clearly, was to show how complex.
Congratulations, you're working girls.
Yeah.
Congratulations, you do work outside the home. Congratulations.
Yes, you've all been working on this movement for 5 years. What do you think that makes you?
Yep.
You are not just a housewife.
And there is no just a housewife, which is the point. One of the points of the feminist movement that was not made particularly, it got lost in some of the other noise.
Yeah.
But, I do absolutely believe that there were second wave feminists that thought that being a housewife was a waste of their lives. I'm sure there were, and they were very loud, and they were sound biteable, and they were easy. But when you read a lot of the stuff and the manifestos and the conversations and the platforms, there wasn't derision of choosing that. There was derision of thinking that was the only valid choice.
Right. And the other thing I think that for me this episode emphasizes again is kind of, we get to this conversation of diversity of perspectives, and throughout the whole episode is the relationship between Midge, who is a closeted gay woman who works for the Carter administration, was Bella's assistant and now is the president's assistant, gets Bella this job at the commission, and is pushing for something on the platform in recognition of sexual orientation. Bella pushes back, as she always does. I saw this a little bit as generational, or maybe different waves or perspectives on feminism. And Bella's so politically focused. You know, we have to keep everyone happy. We can't afford to upset people by pushing for this. But she changes her mind again. And she's done that like 3 times on this show. And we talk about a lot, especially right now, the importance of changing, normalizing that it's okay to change your mind. And I love that they have made Bella Abzug that character in this whole series, where she, by the end of the episode, she's like, you know what? I was wrong. Let's put it, who cares? Let's put it back on. It's the right thing to do. We'll put it back on the platform. And for me, just to see somebody doing that and to see women having these conversations is really, really refreshing.
Yeah, and I think, you know, this show has generally been very historically accurate, so I don't have a lot of reason to believe that this is not how she was.
Right.
But perhaps she wasn't, so we'll just, again, we're always talking about the characters and not necessarily the human, but it does seem like the show is informed by some really accurate descriptions of the humans and how things went down. Some small details, I really loved how they didn't bother to fix Cate Blanchett's hair when she was falling apart, that we were allowed to see disheveledness.
Yes.
I'm continually glad that they try to make these women human beings, as complicated as they are. And just a small rant on Lottie's interpretation of our God.
Lottie Beth.
Sorry, what was it?
Lottie Beth.
Lottie Beth. Oh yeah, I have to use both names.
I would imagine she's very wedded to both of them.
True. So Lottie Beth makes the comment that you have to love what God loves and hate what God hates. Several issues with that, just really briefly. One, possibly yes, okay, sure, but that's Old Testament covenant and we live under a new covenant. That's kind of the whole point of the incarnation of theologically, of Jesus coming and teaching us a different way to be human. The idea of vengeance is no longer a cornerstone of the faith, all of those kind of things. It's about love. The only commandments that Jesus gives involve love. And in fact, the only time that he is anti anything, it is government hypocrisy and corruption. So there's that. We have absolutely no evidence whatsoever that God actually hated homosexuals, especially considering that he created them. That actually doesn't really track with a lot of theology. And the verse that you hear all the time is about hospitality and procreation, not about sexual preference. It's about the safety of the tribe and about the hospitality of the tribe to outsiders. So if you would like to hear my further rants on that, you're fine. But know that what I saw in that conversation was, so we're in 1977. By the time we hit 1997, the Southern Baptist Convention is going to have shifted from a moderate movement to an exceptionally conservative one. And it's folks like Lottie Beth that are the real cornerstones of that decided that decided that to be a Christian in the United States was entirely about your views on abortion and homosexuality. And that's how the religious right, the moral majority, Jerry Falwell, Pat Robertson, and that whole kind of crew solidified their power was around those two particular political issues that are actually not nearly as theologically critical as they would like you to believe. And I also appreciated at the very end, and this could be in my head, I'll accept that, but I'll take it, was the song at the end that was talking about how, over the credits was that me and Jesus are fine, we have an arrangement, and I don't really need your version of these things. A lot of the songs of the 70s and protest songs and the Jesus movement songs, you'll hear a lot of that kind of religious language. That, I have this personal relationship. I'm good. I don't need your version of things. I am still a Christian. I don't need your version of things. And like one of my favorite songs written by a Northern Irish musician, a guy named Brian Houston, is "We don't need religion, but we could use the love of God." And that's really, really applicable for Northern Ireland and really applicable for the United States. And I think that that's what that song was saying at the end.
Interesting.
And that's what a lot of the kind of the subtle digs at Lottie Beth being a problem. But that tape was spread through the churches. I did a Google search. It certainly was. It's one of the reasons. there's a lot of American civic religion reasons why this kind of thing spread like wildfire. And if people are interested, I could do a whole separate video about that, about the American civic religion in the 70s and what that looked like. And because I'm a nerd and I love talking about that stuff, but I will not bore either you or Dr. Hinson anymore. But that was a very subtle kind of, especially when Lottie Beth is lining up her faith with the Klan.
Yeah, and
I really appreciated
planning this like pro-family rally, right? And that wasn't Lottie Beth's idea, that was Phyllis's idea. But it's fascinating to me to see the machinations of this, because obviously as an outsider, I don't have the knowledge that you do in terms of the development of the American civic religion and the development of fundamentalist and evangelical Christianity. But I grew up in Colorado Springs, which is at the time when I was growing up was becoming the epicenter for a lot of these groups and movements.
We joke that it's where Jesus lives. Like in evangelicalism, we joke that Jesus lives in Colorado Springs. So
yes, for those of you that don't know, at last count, there were 25 international headquarters for evangelical Christian organizations in my hometown. And so I grew up.
There's tax codes, by the way, for people that want to know why it happened that way. The answer is tax codes.
Yes. But you know, I grew up hearing about and seeing the impact of Focus on the Family and not knowing a lot about the origins of it. So it's fascinating for me to just get glimpses of where these ideas came from, and how they made their way into American politics and into various sects of Christianity. And I mean, this Lottie Beth person is a real person. She eventually becomes a board member on Reagan's Moral Majority. So like she is as influential as she appears in this show in terms of changing that discourse. And I wouldn't have thought that's what I would have gotten from a show about the struggle for the Equal Rights Amendment. But I love that it shows that complexity, that all of these things were happening and they were influencing each other at the same time. Because they could have just done the ERA, but clearly their point is, you know, this was a part of it and this started because of this push against the Equal Rights Amendment coming from conservative women in America. So I'm all on board for it. I can't wait to see what happens. And I kind of wish if there was a season 2, it would continue to tell this story, because not a lot of us, I don't think, outside of some of these Christian movements, know how these two issues particularly got a real stranglehold in conservative politics.
Yeah, no, and there's a lot of, I've been living this and studying this for arguably since I hit puberty, right? Like I've been thinking about it for 20 odd years, and there's still so many more rabbit trails to fall down. There's still so many more. But one of my favorite juxtapositions in American history is that we get the most liberal Christian president we had until we hit President Obama and Jimmy Carter, going directly into Reagan.
Yeah.
Sociology of religion wise, we have the man who taught Sunday school until he could no longer be in public at a Baptist church in Georgia, up to Reagan, who didn't, you know, there's not a lot known necessarily about his authentic personal faith. We know what he said a lot, but there's been a lot of people that make noise about, well, that was really political. And so I don't know. But certainly he allowed a lot of his administration to be driven by a very specific version of American Christianity, that then also President Clinton and both Bushes allowed as well. And so did Obama.
Quite a pendulum swing.
And so it's a huge pendulum swing. The 80s are when the conservative Christians of America politically decided that the country was going in a direction they didn't want it to go. It was going to be more diverse. They didn't want that. And so they started to do the stranglehold, and all of that is very, very happening right now. So what I hope from a religious perspective that anyone can get from this show, though, is to realize that nothing ever just happens.
Yeah.
These are all movements that grow on each other. And that also it's very complex, that there are people that use the same words to mean very, very different things. And I think we also see that in this episode in terms of the women's movement. When people say homemaker, that means a lot of different things. When people say feminist, that means a lot of different things. And so remembering from global citizen perspective and also a leadership perspective to be constantly curious about language and how we investigate that.
100%. Whew, what an episode.
Guys, this was my favorite one, and I think I said that last episode too. I think they just keep getting better and better.
But it's true, it keeps getting better. We only have 2 left.
I love complex conversations, and that's what this entire show is. So really, really grateful for that. Oh.
Amazing.
Well, that's it from us for episode 7.
Yes.
I got it right that time. And we'll see you later for episode 8.
Bye.